Hey guys, Farrell here. Today we're going to talk about the legendary Fujifilm 35mm f1.4. Are you ready? Let's go. During this video I'll scatter in a few images that I've taken with this lens so you can get a feel for its character. So I've had my 35mm for around 8 years at this point. I used it extensively on the X Pro 1. Since then I've used it on an XS10 and currently it's used on my X-T4. For the longest period of time, this was actually the only lens I had for Fujifilm. I'm going to go as far as to say this is my favourite lens of all time. Now, there's definitely some flaws with this lens that people need to be aware of. There is also a good reason why 10 years after its release, this lens still exists and has not been updated. Now for me, it was the images of this lens that originally made me fall in love with the Fuji system, and it's the reason that I changed from Nikon. So let's talk about some of the pros of this lens. Firstly, the quote-unquote magical rendering. So the bokeh is obviously one of the strong suits of this lens. You can see from the edges of images, it does get a little bit busy, but this is some smooth bokeh. Another huge pro of this lens is that super bright f1.4 aperture. I've taken this on many a night photography adventure. Another huge pro is the size. Because of its size, this lens comes with me on so many trips. Now, I do use it with the included lens hood, which is, again, for some people a pro because they like the unique shape, but the only reason I use it is because it adds a little bit of protection onto the end, and I don't use a lens cap for this. I do like the retro aesthetic that lens hood does add though. Recently I have chosen to protect that front element a little bit more though, and I have added a Tiffin glimmer glass to the end. Another huge pro for me with this lens is that it does have a clickable aperture ring. I personally really enjoy having that handle in there on the lens. This does unfortunately bring us on to some of the cons of this lens, and why I might not recommend it for a first time Fujifilm user. Number one, it isn't weather sealed. This to me is a big deal. Number two, the autofocus just isn't that great. Now going by today's standards, the 35-1.4 is a slow focusing lens. It's not a great video lens. That said, with it paired with one of the newer bodies, it is still pretty good as long as you know what to expect of it. Now I am using it for this video. It's not a designated video lens and I would certainly never recommend it. Only felt appropriate instead of using one of my other lenses. However, going back to the autofocus, I feel it is important to mention that I took quite a risk with this lens. I had the best man and the bridesmaid at my wedding use my X-T4 and my 35mm 1.4 along with a Sigma 18-50 f2.8 to capture some of the magical moments of the day. So you can bet that I'm putting my money where my mouth is when I'm allowing my own wedding to be shot on this lens. Now for a first time Fujifilm user, I would actually consider going for the 35mm f2 just because the autofocus is that much more reliable. Another con of this lens is it is quite prone to chromatic aberration. Again, this lens does come with some flaws, but it makes such unique images that it kind of bucks the trend of being every other clinically sharp lens. Now in the middle at f1.4, this thing is tack sharp, and once you open that up past 2.8, this thing is an absolute monster. However, it has to be said, this lens isn't like any other. It does add a lot of its own flavour to your image. The final con I find with this lens is, like with most Fujifilm lenses, the manual focus control is electronic, also known as fly-by-wire, and I just don't find it to be particularly useful or responsive. I would love to see a revised version of this lens that's weather sealed, a little bit faster autofocus, or alternatively, a true manual focus version. I would buy that in a heartbeat. Until then, this lens isn't going anywhere. This lens isn't for everyone. But if you're willing to brave it, if you're willing to put up with its quirks, it's an absolute beast. Okay guys, thanks for sticking around. Like and subscribe to fight the algorithm gods, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.